I'm very sure all of you have seen some video or the other of Kannadigas versus outsiders, fights with auto drivers, fights on the road. And every time these videos resurface, there is a debate that again starts about whether Bengaluru belongs to outsiders. Have outsiders build the city, or is it a city built by Kannadigas and outsiders are not respecting it enough? And while one side calls the other parochial, the outsiders call Kannadigas parochial. Kannadigas say that people who are coming from other states are not respecting our language, our culture. But to understand what is the genesis of this fight, what is at the core of this insecurity, we did a deep dive here at the News Minute. I'm sure you've seen many other news outlets cover these fights, and some of them have even contributed to it. Social media, of course, amplifies these fights. But it was very important to understand where all of this comes from. We have to look at the history to understand whether there has been any data, any historical reference to this. And to do just this, our Karnataka Bureau Chief, Anisha Sheth, along with Shivani Kava, did a deep dive. They went back almost 200 years ago. Shivani, of course, could not join us for this discussion. She's really unwell, but Anisha will represent what they have found in the story. But before I go across to Anisha, you know what I'm going to say now. If you're a regular, then I will ask you to become a TNM and News Laundry subscriber. But if you are a Kannadiga who doesn't want to be misrepresented, Anisha and Shivani have done a great job in bringing out multiple layers of this story. It took a lot of time for them to do it, but I can assure you that this is very responsible journalism. So that's an added incentive for you to become a member. Now, let's go to Anisha straight away. My first question is just frame the context for our viewers, Anisha, on where this entire fight starts from.
Like you mentioned earlier, I mean, there's a lot of, it keeps popping up every now and then. And the last couple of 2-3 months have been particularly bad, I think, because there were a lot of minor things and random things which got blown out of proportion on social media. And a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of vitriol going on. You know, one side says something, another side says something else. And there were very few voices of reason in all of this.
Right. Just a quick reminder that this story is behind a login. You don't have to pay for it. You just have to log in with your email address and you can read this story. And if you want more such stories, then you should make sure that you leave those comments in the comment section. Tell Anisha what you think of the story. Tell Shivani what you liked, what you didn't like, because when you write to us, it really encourages us to do better work. Let's look at the geographical reasons, right, Anisha? Bangalore is situated in a very unique place in the Deccan Plateau, right? There are parts of Tamil Nadu that are closer to Bengaluru than it is to Chennai. The same holds for Kerala and even Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. How has this contributed to Bengaluru being such a cosmopolitan city? And how has that made things more complicated?
Yeah, so, I mean, it seems obvious, but I also didn't make the connection until I read about it. That, see, Kannada-speaking areas were divided historically under 5 different administrations even 100 years ago. So you have the Bombay Presidency, you have the Madras Presidency, and then you have the 3 princely states, the Kingdom of Hyderabad, the Kingdom of Coorg, and the Mysore state. So from the early 1900s, there were a lot of people at the time who were quite bothered about this, you know, and like there are Kannada epics like the Kaviraja Marga, which talk about a geographical region of Kannada speakers. So it's not that the sentiment is just 100 years old, you know, there is a historical continuity here, which dates back to, I think, the 9th century AD, CE rather. Yeah. So, 100 years ago, there were a lot of people who felt that, you know, Kannada-speaking areas should be united. And this also takes off from the partition of Bengal in 1905. Until then, the idea of a state on linguistic lines, the way we've seen in Europe, was not exactly part of the imagination of people in the Indian subcontinent. And taking off from the Bengal partition, this demand just grows stronger and stronger. And then we come to independence. And by the way, at the time of independence, Karnataka was still called the state of Mysore. Yeah. And Karnataka was only formed with the linguistic reorganization of all the Kannada-speaking areas into one state. And it was renamed Karnataka in the 1950s. and which is why we celebrate Karnataka Rajyotsava in November, on November 1st.
Yeah.
So both Bangalore and Karnataka are linguistically diverse regions. You have many parts of the state which, like say along the border areas today, where you have many Kannada speakers, Marathi speakers, Telugu and Tamil speakers. And within Karnataka also there is a lot of linguistic diversity in different parts. And Bangalore too has historically been linguistically diverse, and we can trace this back to at least say around 300-400 years. And part of the reason is the colonization, and part of it is also the geographical proximity to states or regions which speak Telugu, Malayalam and Tamil. So for these reasons, Bangalore has been historically linguistically diverse. And we need to remember that. So then the question of who is an insider, who is an outsider, today becomes very important, because we are also dealing with migration from the post-liberalization period of the 1990s. So in the early 2000s, there was so much, the breakdown of agriculture led to a lot of distress migration from rural areas to urban areas. And Bangalore is not alone in that. We've seen that happen with large cities and also smaller cities across the country. So this has created a situation where today, based on the available data, and let's remember that it's also outdated, we are looking at 1 in 5 people almost who may be a quote-unquote Hindi speaker. And so they're visibly different. Today what we are seeing, I think, is some kind of antagonism, perhaps, directed at Hindi speakers, whom, say, local people feel that they haven't made enough of an effort to respect the local sentiments. And on the other hand, you have, migrants who've moved here, who have lived here for several years, who feel that they have a right to be here. That is also true because the Constitution does give you the freedom to go wherever you want. And, but it's also, it's a question of perception, right? We feel, perhaps in Karnataka, many people feel that, people who have come and made Bangalore their home, who've made Bengaluru their home, aren't making enough of an effort to respect the local languages.
So then comes the question of policy, right? Because
Yeah.
we've seen many politicians also try to politicize this. I'm not going to judge whether rightly so, whether they're flawed in their thinking. And many policymakers too have tried to pander to certain groups. How has that contributed to making this issue more complicated? And mind you, there are some policies by the union government,
Yeah.
especially in the last 10 years, not only in the last 10 years, but specifically so, that have made this fight more hostile, I feel. What do you think?
Yeah, it has added more layers, I think, because, okay, so let's go back to policy making. See, there is a perception, and some of it is actually very real. Like, Hindi imposition is real. And many commentators, like, the activist Shiv Sundar in Bengaluru, he makes the argument that, a bias towards Hindi already exists in the Constitution in terms of Article 351, which says that, the union government must promote Hindi. So I suppose that also has an impact on, like, say, for example, we recently had Hindi Divas, and, there were protests in Bangalore with people wearing black colored clothes and, protesting against Hindi Divas. So they say that, Hindi is not the villain. It's the imposition of Hindi which they have a problem with. And when it comes to, so there is both the union government policy and the policy set by the state government, which have contributed to a social crisis. So one of the aspects of the state government's role in this crisis, perhaps if we could call it that, is that in the 1960s, they adopted a 3-language policy. And many political thinkers, many academics attribute this decision to the fact that Karnataka's politics has largely been shaped by national parties. And therefore, so their mental makeup is, nationalist in that sense.
Yeah.
So they're not able to think outside the box and outside of that framework. Like, say, for example, comparisons are often drawn to neighboring Tamil Nadu, where the state stuck to two language policy.
Yeah.
But that two language policy also has its roots in the kind of ideology that Periyar built up around the Tamil language. And so therefore it becomes a part of the identity in Tamil Nadu, I suppose. But here in Karnataka, it's never quite taken off that way, and many academics attribute it to this particular framework of the politicians of the state. So that's one part of it. And in the last 10 years, since the Narendra Modi government came to power, this has only accelerated quite a lot. And, even small things, I mean, it's not a small thing actually, the merger of 4 banks, which are from the state, being absorbed into other banks, even these kind of things begin to be perceived as Hindi imposition, because people in banks are, brought in from other states and they don't speak Kannada.
Yeah.
So it becomes a real problem for people, when they go and need to get their, daily lives in order. And that also, these kind of decisions have also contributed to the feeling that, Kannada is under siege.
Well, we'll not give it all away. There is a lot more that Anisha and Shivani have looked at in the story. And again, I'll remind you to log in and read the story. Tell us what you think. Do you want us to do more such stories? You can write to us. You can write to Anisha. Anisha, what's your email address?
Anisha@thenewsminute.com.
That's an email address. What's Shivani's email address?
Shivani@thenewsminute.com.
Very simple. And I am on pooja@thenewsminute.com. You can write to any of us and all of us and tell us what you think. We love hearing from you. So before we go, maybe we can just end on a positive note that this crisis can possibly be solved, averted, if we all can just be more respectful towards each other's languages and cultures and our viewpoints. Thank you for joining us today.